Hey y'all, we have a National Earth Day observance coming up April the 22nd. And I thought you would be interested to figure out how and why Earth Day was instituted, how it's observed, its historical significance, and whether we as Americans should or shouldn't observe Earth Day. I'm bankruptcy and personal injury attorney Greg Niblock. You may know me as the reset button lawyer, helping people hit the reset button on their bills or the insurance company if injured or killed in an accident. This is video number 2, and the final video number 3 will be posted tomorrow. Our first video ended with the idea that we thought there were 2 theories of why some folks are attracted to the Earth Day movement and why some leaders continue to promote the cause of radical environmentalism when it appears to be based on fallacies, outlandish predictions of apocalyptic doom, and that didn't and won't ever come true, and some out and out lies. Well, let's get to it. So now let's talk about the first theory of why some people gravitate to radical environmentalism because of command and control communism / socialistic type governments. Most environmental economists of the time believed that only socialist communist countries would protect the environment because those governments were, they thought, acting for the good of all mankind, while capitalists in the West cared only about profit maximization. Thus, it's no surprise environmentalists would turn a generation of young people towards socialism and communism as the only way to protect the earth. Communist Vladimir Lenin, ruler of Russia, and the people leading the environmental movements all despise capitalism, profits, corporations, industry, free markets, population, and the West, particularly the United States. Lenin and his early communists believed environmental degradation would disappear under communism. In fact, pollution and environmental degradation were outlawed in most communist countries, as if that mattered. Thus, it was not surprising the youth of the beginning environmental movement viewed Lenin and socialist communists as the path to preserving the planet. Although Lenin was not an environmentalist, he was a collectivist. He was an angry atheist who detested human beings, killing so many that he filled landfills with them. However, he shared the desire for central planning championed by the environmentalist. Also, like environmentalists, more people were a problem for Lenin because they both viewed people as a drain on resources. For environmentalists, too many people consume too much of the Earth's alleged limited resources. For Leninists, too many people consume too much of the state's limited resources. Both see mass collectivism and redistribution, not to mention heavy-handed government control and seizure of property, as the solution to perceived problems. The environmental movement ultimately became a haven for old communists from the former Soviet Union. One of them, Mikhail Gorbachev, proudly proclaimed himself to be a Leninist, long before he proudly proclaimed himself to be an environmentalist. When Lenin's empire of the Soviet Union crumbled shortly after President Ronald Reagan's demand in his speech said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Of course, he was referring to the Berlin Wall, and down came the wall and the demise of communist USSR. Once out of the Kremlin, President Gorbachev went from red on the outside to green, forming the Green Cross International, an environmental organization with quasi-religious overtones. Like many communists during the time, Gorbachev traded his worshipful reverence of Vladimir Lenin's Marxism, communism, for environmentalism. The Green Cross International was modeled to resemble the Red Cross label, which is the Red Cross of Jesus Christ, into the Green Cross of Gaia. Gaia is the ancient Greek goddess of all life, the Mother Earth goddess. It's a fitting metaphor for what some have called the green olatry of the movement. Olatry is a Greek word defined as worship that is excessively and fanatically devoted to someone or something as a service paid to the gods. One can see this in Gorbachev's 2000 book on My Country and the World, where he calls for a new environmentalization of consciousness. You catch that? A new environmentalization of consciousness. Like Marxism and Leninism, like the communist movement, the environmental movement wants to expand worldwide with demands for excessive, heavy-handed government involvement everywhere. Gorbachev's environmental organization, the Green Cross International's purpose is to expand worldwide, i.e. globally, through its Value Change program, which includes promoting the frightening values of the Earth Charter and Agenda 21, which we'll discuss in a little bit. Further evidence of Earth Day's connection to communism, socialism is the precise day the organizers chose to observe Earth Day and the precise year it started. It blows my mind but Vladimir Lenin was born April 22nd, 1870, precisely 100 years before the first Earth Day. The number 100 is also ominous for the communist movement. It reflects the number of human beings exterminated by Marxist-Leninism ideology over the last 100 years, according to the Black Book of Communism. It's kind of thick. Both times, Earth Day adherents were baffled why communism failed and concluded their communist socialist paradigm was still correct. It was just the wrong people in charge. Meanwhile, free market environmentalism and private conservation have developed and continue to grow in the United States, demonstrating the root cause environmental degradation had been the absence of clearly defined and enforceable property rights in land, water, air, natural resources, wildlife, and the expansion of the institutions of a free society, which are markets, prices, and not the steel-toed boot of government on the citizen's neck. This, not the steel-toed boot, but free enterprise, would have largely prevented or greatly reduced the levels of environmental degradation. Yet, as with many things, even when an organization's methods, in this case communism, socialism, is shown to absolutely not stop environmental degradation, we don't see the Earth Day crowd calling for the expansion of the institutions of a free society. Sadly, we see the continued cry that the sky is falling and the call for even harsher command and control economic systems. This is in the face of our witnessing government ownership of land, water, and natural resources continuing to grow with each passing year, along with the explosion of governmental regulatory agencies, bureaucracies, and a staggering number of new environmental regulations passed every year. This takes us further away from the solution. Could it be for some that keeping our environment beautiful wasn't what attracted them to Earth Day and its offspring? Maybe it was a means to an end, merely a rebranding and recoloring of socialism, communism, as a cute polar bear that everyone wants to hug, yet will tear you limb from limb once it gets a chance. In other words, it was communism as described by Karl Marx in his Communist Manifesto. It was the communism that Lenin implemented to destroy people in the USSR. It's the same communism that Chairman Mao has, and this is his little red book. So let's stop for a minute and bring our discussion back into focus. You may be asking, what does all this have to do with Earth Day? That's a great question. Well, here's what it is. Earth Day is the seminal watershed moment for environmentalism. It tapped into the youthful energy of the baby boomers, the mistrust of Vietnam War protesters, doomsdayers, anti-establishment, anti-capitalist, religiously agnostic or atheist, as well as people that saw the movement as a way for amassing power through command and control government, i.e. socialism/communism. Without Earth Day and the people that organized it, environmentalism as we know it may not have ever happened. Earth Day and its offspring is the playful polar bear that folks think is cute and cuddly and would never do anything but wave at you as you throwing peanuts at the zoo. However, it's a Trojan horse. Once welcomed into our public schools, universities, and acknowledged by our government as an observance, it will then begin to oppress our society, which it has. Let me introduce you to a new meaning to the word watermelon. It's not a fruit grown on a vine that is green on the outside and red meated on the inside. It's a person whose ideology is environmentalism, i.e. green on the outside for people to see. However, if you look deeper, they are a socialist communist, i.e. red on the inside. This is what happened. The Reds, and when I was growing up, and I'll still say, better dead than red, so being red is bad because it means you're a socialist communist. Due to the communism not being successful, i.e. red, they have changed their colors to green, masquerading as that cute polar bear just wanting to save the planet. Now let's talk about my second theory of why some people gravitate to radical environmentalism, and that is the desire to be part of something greater than themselves through worship like religion. Let's start with a point I believe to be true and is borne out by the Holy Scriptures of the Bible. Man was created by God in His image, and instilled in his being is a desire to worship. Theodore Parker, a minister of the Unitarian Church during the early 1800s, whose words inspired the speeches of Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King Jr., stated so aptly that man cannot live all to this world. If not religious, he will be superstitious. If he worships not the true God, he will have his idols. In other words, every man and woman has an innate desire to worship something, and the question is, what will it be? It's interesting to me that on May 4th, 1970, the Times Magazine article covering the first Earth Day stated it had aspects of a secular, almost pagan holiday, a sense of propitiating an earth increasingly incapable of forgiving what man has inflicted upon it. Now, for regular folks like you and me, propitiating means to win or regain the favor of a god, spirit, or person by doing something that pleases them. This statement's interesting because the serious environmentalists, i.e. the adherents of Earth Day, just by observing their actions, tones, manner of speech, and such, without any research, seems to me to be worshiping the earth. Also, when you see the phrase on the big garbage trucks or a public service announcement, reduce, reuse, and recycle, it feels like one should throw in, repent for being a human being on this planet. A comment posted on Earth Day on April 18, 2019 by Kelly Longwell supports my thought of some believe we should repent for being a human being on planet Earth when she states, planet Earth continues to move without us and would be better off without us. Teach your children well. Each day is Earth Day. Respect, reverence, nourishment, and love. When has she done less for us? She is both our mother and our child. She provides for us, and it is our responsibility to protect her. Every indigenous culture knows this and has practiced it. After researching Earth Day, I think true believers see environmentalism as their religion, much like Christians see Christianity as their religion and their God being Yahweh. Thus, the Earth Day Church is preaching the tenets of their religion, i.e. environmentalism, and their God is Mother Earth. It's not that far-fetched. The ancient Greeks had Gaia, the goddess of all life, Mother Earth. Now consider Gorbachev's call for a new environmentalization of consciousness through his book, On My Country and the World. It's a correct metaphor to say that his Green Cross International, modeled to resemble the Red Cross label, which is the Red Cross of Jesus Christ, has been called the Green Cross of Gaia. Thus, it's fitting to say the organization's purpose is fanatical devotion, worship, and service to their god, Gaia, Mother Earth. All right, y'all, I must admit, I have spent several days researching on this issue and have had difficulty synthesizing everything. I ran across this blog post that seemed to pull it all together, and due to time constraints, I thought I'd present it to you. Therefore, the following is taken from an insightful September 7, 2010 blog post by Susan Brinkman for Women of Grace. Ms. Brinkman indicates the Green Cross International. To give you some idea of the radical aims of this organization, the same players who are involved in Agenda 21 and the Earth Charter are active in the Green Cross, both of which are promoted by the Green Cross International. Now, Agenda 21. Agenda 21 is a 40-chapter document that lays out a global plan to change the way we eat, live, learn, and communicate because we need to save the earth. It was created by the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, the Division for Sustainable Development, as a sustainability agenda, which some experts say is an amalgamation of socialism and extreme environmentalism brushed with an anti-American, anti-capitalist overtone. The purpose behind Agenda 21 was described by Maurice Strong, who served as Secretary General of the 1992 United Nations Conference on Environmental and Development in Rio de Janeiro. He said, and I quote, "Current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class," and they're talking about the United States, "involving high meat consumption and large amounts of frozen and convenience foods, use of fossil fuels, appliances, home and workplace air conditioning, and suburban housing are not sustainable. A shift is necessary which will require a vast strengthening of the multilateral system, including the United Nations." In other words, writes Joseph Morrison of Concerned Women for America in Missouri, this global plan is for us to live on the level of third world nations. That means no box mixes, no microwave meals, limited use of fossil fuels of any kind, no air conditioning, and very little meat. Agenda 21 calls for an almost total elimination of private land ownership, of course, except for the few elites, with all of us living in high-rise apartment buildings. Public transportation would replace all cars. Say goodbye to air conditioning, microwaves, and more than the acceptable number of children, because these all increase your carbon footprint. As draconian as all this sounds and is, the U.S. and dozens of other countries actually signed on to this document in 1992. In fact, the U.S. is considered to be the world's leader in its implementation, thanks to the creation of the President's Council on Sustainable Development by Bill Clinton. People in the United States may not know about Agenda 21 and the President's Council on Sustainable Development, but people around the world certainly do, Morris writes. They know that Chicago, and who else came from Chicago, has one of the greatest numbers of activities existing at the local, neighborhood, and micro-regional level. Sounds like community organizing, doesn't it? They also know that the United States Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA, monitors and promotes activities in this field through their Office of Sustainable Ecosystem and Communities. The scary part is that there are actually sections in the document that explain why planners should use some other name, such as smart growth, to avoid protest by certain segments of the population. Here's how the document describes these segments. Participating in a UN advocated planning process would very likely bring out many of the conspiracy fixated groups and individuals in our society, such as the National Rifle Association, citizen militias, and some members of Congress. This segment of our society who fear a one world government and a UN invasion of our United States through which our individual freedom would be stripped away would actively work to defeat any elected official who joins the conspiracy by undertaking Agenda 21. So, we call our process something else, such as comprehensive planning, growth management, or smart growth. All right, our final video, number 3, in the Earth Day series will discuss the rest of theory number 2 by addressing the Earth Day Charter and finish up with how to view all this through a Christian biblical worldview, and then we'll conclude. Thanks so much for watching our video. I hope you've learned something and enjoyed it. If you wouldn't mind, would you please like our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel? And share this video on your Facebook page. Of course, if we at Niblock & Associates can ever be of assistance regarding bankruptcy, personal injury, wrongful death, or Social Security disability for you, your friends, or your family members, please don't hesitate to give us a call. And until next time, I'm Greg Niblock, and I certainly wish you and your family a blessed day.